geluba naqdoogliyo nugal waa ku darara melay nabadi joogta.
Welcome to ISIRKA. My name's Amina Isir, and join me as I take you on a journey to explore identity, culture, and belonging. Take a seat as I take you through time, space, and various perspectives of cultural identity. Stay tuned to see where the journey will take us today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of ISIRKA. So I'm so excited to do this episode. Ragga Dambe waa ka yar seexday, laakiin I am back. And I've been waiting really a long time to do this episode. And this week's Ragga Dambe will be about Ismaaciil Ubax. And when I was first writing about Ragga Dambe, I think in the Khadar Keo episode I mentioned that Khadar Keo was one of the main motivators for Ragga Dambe, but the other one was Ismaaciil Ubax. And that was like a couple years ago, right in the midst of when I think Codka Ubax was just starting out. It was like a couple months old. Codka Ubax, this is his podcast. And then at the same time, he was also doing this campaign, Qayla Dan Dumar. And basically women were sending him their stories of being harassed at work. And then he was publishing them online. And then there was one particular story that a woman was talking about. She was working in a particular ministry in Somaliland. And then she was facing harassment, and then I don't even think he stated names really, but just the fact that the name of the ministry was in there, then that was enough for there to be a hit out for him, like to arrest him. So go on with the Kachugin. So I thought that was like, that just kind of goes to show in so many different ways how much of our society is really kind of hell-bent on just like continuing the same amount of norms, regardless if they're good or bad. And if somebody comes in that's kind of really opposing that power or that norm of what exists, they are then the ones who are facing the penalty. Because it's not like he was going out and saying it. He was just relating somebody's story and using his platform. But the fact that he had enough of a platform for people to hear about it and talk about it, and the Somali world is so small, that was enough for a warrant to be out for his arrest in Somaliland. Like literally, like where do you even begin to kind of dissect that? But I think that small example, if you only know him for the podcast, then that is, a part of his activism and a part of the work that he does. It's really speaking truth to power in a way that a lot of Somalis don't, but in a way that's also just kind of like, right is right, wrong is wrong, and just gonna say it, right? And that unapologeticness to still be somebody that is so connected or so much of an insider within the Somali community, to operate like that out of a space that very much I'm still going to continue to be an insider, I think is so interesting. And I'm always like, oh my God. Like, and I always tell him this, and he knows this, but I think that that's kind of, change will only come about from the inside. It's also a unique measure when a lot of social activists that are really like staunch activists on certain causes really come in like with kind of Western ideologies and Western ways of relaying that information, and like a sense of arrogance, like, you guys are so wrong for doing things this way, and how dare you? Whereas his approach is very much like just speaking truth to power. I mean, it's not in a way that's tokenizing or otherizing or diminishing anything. It's just a way of relaying and giving people opportunity from the inside to say, this is what's happening and this is what's wrong. And I think, and that's one thing I always tell him too. But I think what's so interesting about him is he's lived in a whole bunch of different countries, and you can see how living amongst those different spaces have socialized them and kind of added to the repertoire of who he is, right? But he still is very much grounded and rooted in being Somali, but also being a Somali, like, he's also very much rooted within the Somali context. So Ismaaciil, the first time I heard of him was, first of all I heard was Ubaxle, and I was like, what is this man that everyone keeps talking about, whose name is Ubaxle, and or Ubax, like, and he wrote romantic novels. So he was an author at first, and he was writing stories about love in the Somali language. And when we would have like those Somali literature nights, most of the crowd are like 40, 50 plus, you know, and like him, a couple of his homeboys are the only ones under the age of 40 that are writing books in Somali. And I was just like, what is happening here? And so like those two things together, I was like, and he was like, why are you saying that? And I'm like, because like a lot of everyone else who was there was a lot older that chose to still speak Somali, right? Because that's the first language that they knew, probably the strongest language that they knew. But he was somebody who spoke a couple other languages pretty well, like, and could express himself in those languages. So the fact that he still continued to choose to speak in Somali, that he still continues like to do a lot of work around the Somali language, he's like a little old man at heart, I guess. But it very much is a way that's also kind of making culture, language appealing in a way that, like, if a lot of the older people are writing books in Somali, obviously that might not be something that we could relate with, right? Like, as Daliaro, it might just be about Wahishomarin, about Halganki, about Tagalki, about whatever. But like his last book, Gah, I was reading it just to like look at it, right? And at one part the weekend was in there, and then there was a young girl and she was at Savannah in West London. I was like, oh, I love Savannah. And so it's the, I think that that's the representation aspect that I always keep talking about that's really important, is to say, okay, you can still there's something that we can relate to as youngsters, especially youngsters growing up in the diaspora, but there's still a space to have access to language and culture and storytelling. And I think a lot of everything Ismaaciil does is rooted within storytelling. And that makes it so that everybody will want to listen, right? Like, it's not going back to the whole activism bit. If somebody's just yelling, saying you should do things this way, you should do things that way, and how dare you, like, that's not giving space for people to want to engage with you. That's very much already setting up a boundary. And I think what Ismaaciil does very well is create a space for people to engage with him, with his work, and whatever work he's kind of putting out there. Half the time on Facebook, he's like just putting funny stuff, but that's still, you know, people are going to respond to that always, right? So then when he puts something serious or something that's kind of leading towards something, the people will always watch that because they already have their eyes on everything that he's posting and everything that he's doing. So when the author, like the old school romantic at heart, he's also kind of grown and developed a lot from the posts that he used to put on Instagram. And but I think that that's also something that I want to quickly touch on, like the focus on romance. And I talked to him a lot about, like, why are you like this? Like, I think from the day I met him till now, I'm always just kind of like, this is such an anomaly of things to put together. The way in which he even chooses to like present himself and carry himself. When you meet him, he's very warm, he's very friendly, like, you know, like, like, and then but it's kind of like there's this innate softness, like, that's not like innate softness is just a parent that comes out and like it's just like a kind person type of thing. The focus on romance, I think, is also just kind of like, I literally could have wrapped my head around it, because I'm like, okay, first of all, we're Somalis, like, like, it's just, you know, our people are nomads, and like we're known for being these like really like other tough people. So what is this focus? I was like, I literally, like, I was like, I can't put two and two together. Like, I can accept like Westerners, but I was like, I don't understand the focus on romance in a Somali context. So even on that basic level, on that specific example, is also kind of adding in another level of like, and Haris, and I guess taking away the hishod, right? Like, I think there's a lot of, like, when you ask like your parents' generation and stuff about how they even got married, a lot of them would just be like, well, we just got married. Like, there's no talk about like if they courted each other, anything. And there's so much of like, well, so I think that psyche, I guess, is that adding that psyche is something different. So I asked him a couple of questions, particularly, right, about like how he understands womanhood, how he understands Somali malehood, like what is Raganimo like associated with. He said that he would help to change the attitude of seeing Raganimo as the ultimate goal and Dumarnimo as weakness. And a lot of kind of like how he felt about Raganimo is basically like not exactly like the superior ultimate thing that I think a lot of our culture really kind of is focusing a lot of attention on. Like if men are to be strong and women are to be weak, like it's kind of like men are also allowed to have feelings type of thing. And he also said that a common thing that he would like to change is the fact that showing emotions means that you're weak. He said in his own words that being strong means being able to show your emotion. And I think when you kind of look at a lot of what the work that he does, so even the initial focus on romance, but even now his current series about Waylega, they were like, they got married on me. Also that like disappointment, like, which is a very natural thing. Like, obviously, this happens a lot. There's so many stories that are coming out about that. Giving a space to that, I think also a lot of people, it's really nice to even just see, like, even the fact that, okay, maybe, like, they didn't come to, like, like, it didn't work out that this couple would get married. But there still is like a sweetness of the story, right? And like that old love that's in there that I think is still really nice to listen to. And also with putting that out into the mainstream is kind of acknowledging that it is a normal part of life and it happens, right? Like, and so the shame and or whatever, like hiding it, trying to act like it didn't bother you, doesn't necessarily need to be something that we kind of continue or hold on to. And so all of that storytelling then has kind of like evolved into the podcast Codka Ubax. So Codka Ubax, if you guys all listen to Codka Ubax, I hope you recognize my voice. But when he started Codka Ubax, I was like, this is such like, for me as somebody who was raised in the diaspora, a lot of the information about like the Somali culture, context, stories, histories, I feel like is so inaccessible unless like either like dadka aad baad ku xiran tahay or like you really seek that out and basically spend a lot of time with old people or your family or stuff like that. So I think Codka Ubax is a great platform and a great way to also relay stories and experiences of people that might not be able to share it on the mainstream, right? Like, so when you listen to songs and you're like, oh, I wonder what it is. And then also even just speak to the creatives that are behind writing these songs, how they perceive the world and how that affects the songs that they write and the way in which they write the songs. So I think a couple of my favorite episodes on Codka Ubax personally was definitely like the ones with like Sadiq Burmad and Abdullah Hassan Ganay, like kind of listening to, and Halif Khair. That was a crazy story, but just listening to the background of these people, of these men who are writing a lot of stories, and I think also even allowing them to present themselves in various ways and giving them a platform to express themselves is also interesting, because then that allows a connection, right, like between them and their listeners and the audience in a way that's not just like, oh, you need to, you know this person because they are this and this, and then you just like give them respect, you know, like off top, but it's not like, you know, you would ever spend time to like really get to know them and to like speak to them and things like that. And so I asked him, what did Codka Ubax allow you that writing didn't? And then he said, Codka Ubax exposed me to a completely new audience. To be honest, sometimes I have a love-hate relationship with it, because, you know, he loves writing and that was his passion. That's what he really has spent a lot of time doing. And now a lot of people know him for the podcast, and his writings and his books are kind of forgotten. But he also says that, you know, it's another tool to disseminate his message, and he's very thankful for it. And in the future, we will also see Codka Ubax be bigger and better. It's already kind of grown into a visual podcast right now. And then he's kind of looking into films and directing and producing. And so we'll probably see some films, inshallah, by him in the future. But I think all that's a natural progression rooted within storytelling. There was one episode that he did about Abdi Tahlil, right after he passed away. And that also allows you to see his storytelling and the way in which, like, as a writer, he's like crafting his argument and kind of putting things together and descriptively kind of relaying, you know, what the background is. Like, I think they were in Mogadishu 1977. That was a beautiful episode. I really loved that one. I really loved how he put it together. And another one of his earlier episodes, you can also see where he used those elements of his storytelling in the way that he would as a writer. In that episode, Arura Agwain, he was kind of building off this mahmah, or the ways in which like Somalis perceived women and gender norms, but then also within that, he used like descriptive elements of storytelling. So instead of just like describing it, well, he did describe it himself, but then he added in those audio sounds, and it was such a cool way of like mixing the two, the descriptive written storytelling as well as the audio storytelling. There were like birds in the background, and it was like, and then it's like he woke up in the morning, you could hear the birds and the sun was shining in his face. So that was a very nice episode. So I think with Codka Ubax, like the intro is a place to discuss art, storytelling, and a platform to discuss ideas that affect our society the most. And I think in this time and age, when a lot of the media platforms in a Somali context are all really kind of hyper-focused on like politics and disasters and things like that, Codka Ubax really kind of gives a space for arts and culture to be celebrated on a regular basis. For us to also see what the youth like back home in the diaspora are doing, and it's a good connector to also, it's a good connector, period. It's like a good connector to language, it's a good connector to like cultural production, it's a good connector to what's going on back home, and it's a really kind of innovative space where it doesn't really belong to only like one subset of people or one specific topic, but within the cultural production and the language production, I think, going back to what I was saying earlier about Gah, there's something about also kind of that language doesn't have to just stick to kind of like antiquated cultural norms. That language is something that's vibrant, that's still continuing to grow and flourish. And so keeping that a part of your daily life and in your psyche. And, you know, for a lot of people in diaspora, they might be listening to Codka Ubax, and that might be a way that they're still listening to Somali on a regular basis, outside of like speaking to their family members. I just think basically it's kind of like a cool way to still connect with culture and language and storytelling and kind of what's happening currently in terms of cultural production. And so that's an important space, and we'll continue to kind of see what happens with that space, but also what Ismaaciil Ubax kind of continues to do. No pressure, but our eyes we're all watching. So in the beginning, when I said that, I used to think his name was Ubaxle, and then even they used to refer to him a lot as Ubax, and so I realized, okay, his name's not Ubaxle, his name's Ubax, and also, why is this man going by Ubax? Like, but I think it's like, it didn't make sense. But then after I met him, I was like, okay, I can see it, you know, like, I think it makes sense. Like, it suits him, right? It works for him in a way that I don't think that's demasculating. I think it works for him. It just goes to show that something like the way Somalis talk about flowers, especially as like being like the epitome of like love, all those things, it suits the type of like artist and like that he's like reflecting himself as, that he would be a flower in the sense of growing, or like literally figuratively flowers growing in like the most like other type of environment, like where, you know, there's always like droughts and it doesn't rain too much in the north, and it's not like we do have flowers in the north, but we don't have flowers everywhere, you know? So it's very like unique, and it kind of fought to exist, and then it's very much celebrated, adored, and it's something that's been soft despite its environment. So when I asked him what would he like to be remembered for, he said the best thing to be remembered for is kindness. And I hope that when people think of me when I'm no longer here, that they remember me and smile. And so this episode of Ragga Dambe was about Ismaaciil Ubax. He's a writer, he's a podcaster, he's a content creator, he's overall a storyteller and an activist that's really rooted in kind of ensuring that we appreciate all aspects of our full human experience. He's a strong celebrator of Somali language and literature. You all probably came here because you know him, but I think it'll be great to see kind of what he ends up being in the future and how he continues to grow. So I'd say Ismaaciil horo keep going. And I mean, if you made it this far in the episode, I just want to say that one of the reasons this podcast exists is because he kept telling me to do this, him and Zahur. So thank you guys, I appreciate y'all. With that, I would also say that a part of this Ragga Dambe series is to highlight Somali male artists, but also, through his artistry and his personal example, he's also been somebody that has added on to the possibility of what could be. But ultimately, the focus on Ragga Dambe was to also highlight the ways in which if Somali men are traditionally the gatekeepers of Somali society, then how are these male artists adding a positive spin to Somali society, and what are the ways in which they're interrogating it and adding something new. So I hope you all have enjoyed this episode. If you have not checked out Codka Ubax, listen to Codka Ubax, check out his writings, and stay tuned for next episode.
ku kala naqroono meel wana